channel in even more ways. Okay, great. Welcome to live chat. All right, great. Welcome to plain fancy. Okay, this thing is live. Got it. Where's the camera? Right there. All right. So I went live on Instagram. Go live on here. See if anybody joins. I was talking about recently dead heroes. That didn't go well. Recently lost a friend. Oh, light. Let's try the light. All right. You still get alerts through the live. And the camera's different, a little bit different. Hey, what's up? Thanks for joining, whoever you are. Let me see. How do I see the chat? We're chat viewing. Some messages, such as potential spam. All messages visible. Hide all. All. It wants me to learn more while I'm live on chat. That's kind of strange. Oh, you got filters. Look at there. You can do it in olden times. Okay, so how do I see who's asking me questions? New pinned chat. You can pin a chat in the top of your live chat. I don't understand what's happening. Midwest, what's up? Okay. It pops up and then it goes away. So that kind of sucks because how am I supposed to like remember to guard your privacy and abide by the community guidelines? Well, that's easy enough. Can I keep bringing the Oh, I see. I can at least I can bring them back up. Thanks for the comment, Midwest. That helps a ton. If you got a question, fire it, man. I'm just trying to learn about this new microphone. Recent hurricanes. Yeah, man. I stayed in Georgia. I was up there looking at the pond and stuff when the hurricane came in. So I didn't I didn't have any troubles being stuck in Florida without power or anything. But actually my power, I don't think my power went out over here but for a couple of hours. It really wasn't too much trouble. I think it passed by so fast. Oh, thanks, man. Thanks for that information because I was wondering. I'm having an allergy attack. Um, I got the new mic and it sets up a little bit differently. The I'm operating off this iPad Pro, so yeah, learning experiences all the way around for me here. But I've been on too many podcasts with Andrew and all those guys, Alex and Oliver, and my audio's been terrible. I've noticed, so I've been meaning to upgrade, and I went with these old maps. My dad had them, so I went with I just got them dry mounted like you'd mount a picture, but they're flat, and I don't know. They seem to fit. Kind of like them back there. Rock with that for a little while. I couldn't think of any better background. All right, back to messing with YouTube. It wants you to. I wanted. Where did that? It said learn more. There we go. We can learn more. Oh no, it wants to take me to the internet. That is strange. I don't understand. Anyway, I could. I don't know. I kind of like the mic right there, and I just got to remember the camera's right here. I'm the worst about looking in the wrong places. All right. Is there anything else on here that I'm missing? Oh, well, that's interesting. I kind of like the black and white sepia. Midwest. I missed that. Hold on. Let me go back. Make it visible. Midwest says had a lunkerless summer at the pond at the government property. Yeah, right, man. I've had a lunkerless summer myself, but that's my own fault because I haven't been fishing very much. I wonder if I can kick this like this and get my Tackle Talk hat in there. There we go. Do some shameless advertising for Andrew. I think I'm going back on Tackle Talk soon. I guess, does it look reversed because it's the front facing camera? Probably. I'm not sure like what any of this does. There's enough choices though. Yeah, how about no filter? Yeah, Midwest man. I tell you what, I hear you on lunkerless. It's been tough fishing in Florida for real. And then probably about a month, 6 weeks ago, it got extremely hot, and I've been going to the coast a little bit, doing some non bass fishing type fishing stuff. But man, I am I have been taking a break just because of the weather. I just don't want to be out there in it. I spent too many years on a john boat picking up trash and crap in ponds. I just sometimes I just can't feel it. I just not feeling going out there. Too many years on the water. That's kind of one thing people dream about that. Oh, I wish I could go out there every day. It's like, yeah, careful what you wish for. Every day can be a grind after a couple of decades in the heat and the junk. Hey, 2 likes, 2 followers. All right. Fire off any questions, man. I am just pushing buttons on here and trying to learn how save a highlight, share. For some reason, I can mute the mic from the screen. Okay. I can mute the mic from the mic too. And welcome to live chat. And I think that just switches the camera around. That doesn't do me any good. Anyway, so yeah, I haven't caught any big fish either, man. I'm kind of jonesing. I'm waiting for this weather to calm down. It's still like it was cool yesterday. Um, One thing I have been doing, I've been riding a bike. I've been trying to ride every day. I'm trying to lose a little weight, be a little healthier. And yesterday was the most pleasant day that I've been on a ride in a while. Hey, 3 folks. All right, man. Thanks for joining. If you have any questions, throw them up there. I don't. I think they pop up every time you guys write something. I'm new to going live on YouTube, and just here to answer any pond questions or any questions you have related to anything, really. Midwest is in Chicago. 100-degree days. See, I don't like the fade out deal. Hold on. One moment. Thank you. Oh yeah, you're constant. He mentioned. I guess you guys can see his thing there. I don't think you can see it on Instagram. Assuming you can see it here. Yeah, dude, the heat is a killer for fish. It's a physics deal. Um, when you heat the water up, it holds less oxygen. So you get into a situation where everything in the pond, everything alive in the pond is using oxygen at night. And then when it gets super hot, it uh, it has less oxygen. When the sun goes down, the hot water holds less oxygen, and that's where the problems start. And your oxygen problems and the heat usually occur at night. And I had another question come up, and I'm gonna push buttons and be awkward about this. Quincy writes in, "Yeah, Quincy, you nailed it, man. What's happened?" Quincy says, ask the question: is the reason why you don't see as many big bass anymore is because people don't keep any bass anymore? And yes, that is, you are correct. Um, if you're an older person or have access to photos of an older bass fisherman from, say, this before the 80s, um, bass were heavily harvested. People kind of didn't understand that you could keep too many, and they tended to keep everything that they caught. So the biggest problem in pond management in the 70s, and I know this because a couple of my colleagues managed ponds back then, the same ponds I manage now, as a matter of fact. Um, so what happened was they would over harvest the bass, which would swing the pond towards bluegill heavy, and have a lot of ponds that were full of small bluegill because they had no predators to control their numbers. Um, Flip over into the 80s and you start getting bass tournaments, and those bass tournaments had a problem initially when they got started, in that they didn't have good fish handling skills. Most of them still don't. So, but they were really bad back then, and a lot of the fish that they brought in to weigh in died, and that pissed everybody off who lived locally around the lakes. So the bass tournament guys figured out real quick that if they couldn't get the bass at least back to the weigh-in and back into the water alive, that they were going to have a problem, and they had a huge PR problem. That's kind of how catch and release was born. No scientist ever said throw back all the bass. It was the guys who ran the tournaments, and that has gone on now for 30 years, where guys like me are at this point now, we're in the opposite situation of what used to be happening back in the 70s, where instead of managing the lakes right, all the bass are being returned. And bass have a tendency to crowd. And I mean, we use the pond as an example as to the environment, how the environments work. And I think a lot of what people miss is they want to mix in Mother Nature with this for some reason. And the pond that I'm working on right now, and all the ponds that I've ever managed, are all man made, not one natural one. So Mother Nature doesn't really apply here. We're dealing with man made bodies of water in the southeast, and we're dealing with man made stocking strategies as well. This is not something that you can just let the stream come in, let all the fish come in, and do it, and expect that to work. It doesn't work that way. And people kind of get lost in that idea of Mother Nature will take care of all of it. Mother Nature's a brutal killer and will kill everything there. That's kind of what I think about that. Much like we've had the heat related, with Midwest coming in here with his heat related stuff, there's some Mother Nature dealing death in the form of heat. And when it does it to your pond, you can't get away from it. You can't escape the heat. You can't escape physics. If you have too much plankton in fish and too little oxygen due to heat, your fish are dying, and there's nothing you're going to do to fix it. And I know because I've seen it. There are certain environmental conditions that you can enact that no matter what you do, your fish are dying. It's a fact. But I hope that helped, man. See if I got any other No, nothing else has popped up. Still just got two folks, but hey, I'm happy to have two folks on YouTube, man. I have not been, um, I haven't been consistent. I'm just gonna chill out here, man. So any questions you got, we'll talk about anything you want, man. I'm gonna stay on here for a while because I haven't been committing enough time to YouTube, and I don't, I got an hour to kill in the morning to answer pond questions or fish questions or anything anybody has, and I'd like to. I'm getting pretty close, like to 1,000 people, and I just gotta have. I'm just gonna have to kind of bump up my effort. Be more consistent. And I think I'll be fine on YouTube and make a few bucks. Hopefully. Is this audio good, guys? Can you hear? Oh, there's another question coming by. Probably from Midwest again. Yeah, Midwest. If a person has access to 15 acre, not too big. Stupid fade out. Hold on. What is the maximum frequency of outings a guy should do before bass get negatively conditioned? Okay, you're going to see the most problems with negatively conditioned. Okay, audio is good. Thanks, bro. You're going to see the most problems with negatively conditioned fish in your smaller bodies of water. Once you start getting to 15 acres, it'll kind of fall into harder to impact, I guess. And the bigger they get, the harder they are to impact. So what I'm getting at is you fishing a 1 acre pond every day versus you fishing a 15 acre pond every day are kind of two different things. The 1 acre pond is going to learn and react to you much, much quicker, and you're going to kind of ingrain into those fish resistance. It's harder for one person to impact 15 acres, but I'm promised it can be done. And I'll give you an example. There was this neighborhood in Atlanta. It was over off 324 near the Mall of Georgia. What was the name of that place? I think it was called Lakesville Peachtree over there. And they had 3 ponds that stacked up on top of one another. It was a 4 acre and like a 6, and then the back one was 16 acres. So I managed that place for probably 15 years, 12 years. And about halfway through it, in that 16 acre pond back there, it was good fishing. Nobody fished in it. It was like a lake community that no one fished, and that's way more common than you think. You would think that people, bought a house on a lake would fish in it. Mm-mm. Most people don't. So you can just go back there and slay, right? I mean, 15 acres of water, no fishing pressure. I used to enjoy going over there fishing. Well, probably about halfway, about 5-6 years into that, the pond got a couple retired guys moved in, and those 2 retired guys both like to fish, and both chipped in on the dock and the boat, and they met each other down there every day, and they started fishing in that lake. And I would say it took about 2 years of those guys fishing every day to where they were on the phone with me, and they're like, something's wrong with the lake. And I'm like, well, what do you think's wrong with the lake? Well, there's something wrong with the bass. They're not biting. And I'm like, yeah. You guys have kind of conditioned them, You have you fished it too hard. You've been fishing a 15 acre pond every day for 2 years. And I mean literally every day. They were down there all the time. I said, switch to live bait, try live bait, and you'll probably catch some fish. Because that's the only thing you guys haven't shown them. And even then, like, I'm seeing live bait issues in Florida, man. Like, these guys pound the fish on Rodman right here behind the house. They're live bait killers in there. All they do is chunk shiners in there. And I think that makes a difference because Rodman is really tough to fish artificial. There's only about 4 lures I could recommend you even use back there that have ever even gotten bit. So I don't know. I kind of wandered there, but I hope that, gives you an idea of what's going on with that and how you can see fish behavior in ponds, right? Um, how much impact do fertilizer and pesticides have on fish populations? That's a good question, Quincy. Usually the opposite of what people think, honestly. So if you are in a homeowners association type place, right? And they got, or a golf course, let's use a golf course, where they're using the utmost fertilizer and pesticides to manage that golf course, right? But then you go pull water samples by the golf course. The golf course water samples are cleaner. There's no phosphorus leaching in. There's no problems in the water. Um, Everybody assumes all that stuff runs off into the water. But what you've actually got going is the golf course guys are professional applicators. And on top of that, they're well trained professional applicators. They spray all the time. So they don't put more phosphorus on the grass than the grass actually needs. They can measure it and they know exactly how much, just like we can measure and know exactly how many bass to take from the pond because we're experts there. They know how much phosphorus to put on the grass to make it grow. And since the grass is so dense and there's so much more grass there than there would normally be, none of that phosphorus gets to the water. It gets taken up by the plant and used. And you can consistently see that around most of these like HOA type places where their grasses are professionally managed. There's not fertilizer running off into the water, right? If there is a little bit, it comes in the form of idiots who take their grass clippings and walk them down to the lake and dump them into the pond. Again, professional applicator, professional landscaper isn't going to do that to you, but a guy cutting his own grass and not realizing all the phosphorus in the blades of grass are going right into the water and creating an algae problem. So then when you've got that, yeah, that's a problem. And it's going to create a filamentous algae bloom on your pond that's ridiculous when people do that to you. So it gets into who is doing what and where. And it's generally the general public that are jamming you up, not the pros. Who's going to is a professional fish hatchery going to come in there and bring a bunch of fish for free and dump them in my lake that I don't need? No, that's never going to happen. But is some guy in the neighborhood who doesn't know what he's doing go catch 20 fish and bring them in and throw them in there on you? You bet. And that guy just screwed my life up. Not, he didn't mean to do that. He thought he was helping, but it wasn't. Midwest, eutrophication from geese feces a bigger threat. Yeah, dude, I've got a good story about that one. Let me finish that. These things fade away. Yeah, all right. So Midwest is asking about having hot fecal coliform counts or E. coli or any of those kind of bacterial counts in your water. This happened once in a homeowner association too. Some clown worked for the EPA and he was head of the lake committee, and he went around. He took a bunch of water samples all around. It was a 100-acre lake. It wasn't a small place. And one of the homes tested hot, fecal or E. coli or whatever. I can't even remember what bacteria he was testing for, but it tested hot right behind this guy's house, like really, really hot. And he went back and tested it again. I mean, he might have pulled maybe 3 tests. He really wasn't doing the water testing exactly right anyway, but he then organized like the HOA against this guy to fix his septic system because the water test behind his house had this man convinced that his septic system was failing and leaching waste into the lake. Now, I'm not sure why he couldn't obviously see that the man at the lake also had troughs of cracked corn in his backyard, 3 feet from the lake, that he fed the ducks and geese from daily. And his backyard looked like you would expect it to look if you fed a 100-acre lake ducks and geese daily. It was covered in poop. And it was, you know, I did not run the test that proves the fecal coliform came from the geese, not humans, because that test costs like $5,000. But again, I'm going to use Occam's razor. The simplest possible solution is usually the correct one. In a cove full of goose poop near the goose feeding bin is probably going to test hot. And the guy from the EPA disagreed with me on that one. He wanted to fire me, but actually, I think he was so unliked by the board that they ended up letting him go, and I got the job for 12 years. So sometimes disagreeing with people gets you a lot of work. I didn't disagree with him in a mean way or anything like I would do here, but I still disagreed and said that I thought that the geese and the ducks that he fed in his yard were the culprit of the high E. coli count and not his septic tank. And if I had any money at all, I would still bet all of it that that's correct. Anyway, hope that helps. They can definitely spike your tests. Actually, I had a buddy of mine did testing for the bacterial counts on West Point, which is a big reservoir, like 20 or 30,000 acres in middle Georgia. And the bacterial counts would spike there after the rains, and they actually figured it out. It was the pet waste. It was all the dog poop in the watershed in people's yards that got washed in and caused those nutrient loading and fecal coliform, E. coli / count problems. All came from pet waste that wasn't being collected from the yard. So if you want to kind of point the finger at where all these problems are coming from, I think you could probably expand that problem right there nationwide. I think if we had a better control of our pet waste, our water systems, especially where they are, in Georgia, we don't have the kind of the problems that some of the other places have with nutrient loading, but that's a long chemistry conversation that I'm not even really qualified to talk about, but or articulate enough to talk about. But anyway, Georgia is kind of a unique situation with low hardness and low alkalinity that kind of throttles back any kind of nutrient loading we get there. It usually has to be a significant, huge problem. But like up in the Midwest, or I've been up around Chicago, or Midwest is up talking about, man, up there their water's green and they have like you can't manage the pond to not have plants up there. Like if you don't have some plants pulling some phosphorus out of the water, you're probably going to have a fish kill up around Chicago because it's just ridiculous. It's the opposite of what I'm dealing with in Georgia, which is low nutrients, and I can boost it. That's the part people don't get is like you can't take what I'm doing in Georgia and apply it everywhere. And I try to tell people that every time they try to question it and make it, they want to take some rule of thumb some post or some little sentence that you write and apply it to like every situation everywhere. It's like, no, that's really not how that works, bro. All right, Midwest, what do we got? Water's impaired by concentrated animals. Yeah. Hurt rivers. Oh yeah, dude. You're kind of moving away from my personal experience when you start getting into that kind of thing. But what I do have a lot of experience with is I did a lot of stream sampling when I was at University of Georgia. I helped a guy get his PhD, and he needed a lot of fish collected. Like we collected fish from I think 36 streams twice a season for a couple two seasons at least, maybe two and a half. I can't remember, but we did a lot of stream collecting. But where I did stream collecting was incredibly high quality streams in North Georgia, not really impacted by what you're describing, but we did have streams that were impacted by agriculture. And the agriculture guys kind of got a pass, if the cows had been watering out of the stream for, you know, generations, there wasn't really too much restrictions or any kind of environmental laws that made them change that. And there'd be a lot of cows just walking through the stream. And of course, where that happened, you had erosion, and erosion covered the rocks. And the problem with covering the rocks in the stream is that's where the algae grows. It's kind of the base of the food chain down there. And when it gets all covered up in mud and sediment, it really reduces the amount of fish that can live in the stream in that area. And we would see that obviously, like you go upstream into the mountain to where it was really, rocky bottom, perfect cobble substrate, and it had the leaves from the fall, every fall falling in there, giving it food and energy. Um, those would have 25, 30, sometimes 32, 35 species of fish up there. They'd just be very diverse streams. But you move down to where the agriculture is, and six, eight species of usually minnows, completely different looking fish population on the exact same stream because of the agriculture. And then, so that's kind of a micro version of what you're describing when you start talking about those types of situations where they're impacting so much runoff, so much, nitrogen and phosphorus runoff and stuff, that they're impacting entire river systems because of the farming practice. That's, it needs to be addressed, but I'm definitely not the person who has worked in that realm, kind of punching above my weight up there, if you will. Hey, 7 folks, man. Appreciate it, man. You guys throw any questions up there, I'll try to answer them. Give you a good bunch of good excuses anyway. Quincy says, do you know anything about the impact of snakehead on bass and other fish populations? Sure, man. I don't even really have to know much about snakeheads. It's because I have knowledge about competing species. And it's no different than... All right, so we have a predator, an unknown predator that's into the pond, right? It feeds on what bass feed on. So it's kind of a direct correlation. Like, we know when we stock our bass population that it'll be healthy and growing at around 40 fish per acre. Maybe it's 35, maybe it's 45, depending on where you are. But I know right around that sweet spot in there is where I'm going to get the biggest, healthiest bass the quickest. So let's say I'm sitting in that situation and snakeheads get in. Well, the first thing I'm going to see is it's another predator sharing the available forage. And I was getting, say, I don't know, my good fish growth, say 2 pounds a year. I'm getting average growth of 1 pound a year on all my fish. But my really good bass are getting growth 2 pounds a year. But you add another fish that goes in and starts consuming that forage, because the forage base is limited. So that instantly drops that bass growth. You're not getting 2 pounds a year anymore automatically. Now, how much of the forage, how many snakeheads do you have? Are they consuming enough forage to be noticeable? Or are they consuming all of it to where your bass just go to skinny because they just, their forage supply has been stripped and they just lose weight? Again, that's going to go to a site by site basis on how fast and how many snakeheads are in there. One or two, you're not going to really notice anything in the bass population. Over time, as they start to even out in numbers or take over in numbers, like you could see snakeheads completely displace some bass populations where the bass just aren't there anymore. That's completely possible. Crappie do that to ponds. I've seen plenty of ponds where over about a 5-year period, crappie come in, they get there, and then all of a sudden the bass population starts to fade away. It's because the crappie fry feed on the bass fry early in the spring. They wipe them out. And it's kind of an uncontrollable thing. It has to do with weather and the timing of the spawn. But if it lines up right, you can see crappie just wipe your bass population completely out in very similar fashion to what we just described with snakeheads. So you can also see it with green sunfish. You can also see it with pike. All these conversations of competing fish. It doesn't matter the species of the fish, really. Like, you kind of see the same patterns, if that makes sense. He says, Quincy writes in, he's watched bass and a few other fish disappear. Yeah, I would say, and Midwest is coming back in Michigan, home state, northern trout streams get harmed by silt and sand, and the stupid thing fades away, so I can't read the whole thing. Covers the gravel needed for spawning. Correct. Yes, that you're going to be losing especially important habitat to trout when you start covering the bottom in sediment. That gets back to basically all the food of the stream becomes planktonic. There's nothing in the cracks or the crevices. There's no insects to feed on for the fish. It's very complex, hard to explain, but yeah, that's how that works. Hey, Quincy, thanks for tuning in, buddy. I appreciate you asking the questions. If anybody else has questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Like I said, I'm just kind of new. I'm going to start going on doing this YouTube thing live and just trying to get my YouTube brownie points up. I'm not really sure how, if I think the live probably counts towards your. But yeah, I'm going to hang out another 15 or 20 minutes. But I don't know. When I talk about stuff, I try to talk about the things that I've seen in the field. Hey, Kevin's writing in. North Central Illinois. And fishes in Lake Story. And we're going to have to go pushing buttons again because it's fading out and I can't read it. Recently seen shiners feeding aggressively on algae. Yeah. And floats into the lake from a feeder stream. Yeah. I would say they're just probably feeding on something that's hatched out and trapped in that algae. That filamentous algae can be like you know how it feels. It's slimy, and it can trap. You know, it can trap insects and things like that. And it can also be a place too. Like if you let your algae get out of control, right? In a pond. I've seen this a lot in Georgia. Say and the smaller the pond, the easier it is to do too. Once you get under 5 acres, it'll get out of hand real quick on you. So what happens is the filamentous algae gets really thick and dense in the springtime, and that's the time the bass spawn, right around then. And so the baby bass hatch, and the algae's kind of already there, and the algae just gets worse and worse and worse because they don't control it. You know, the people who don't really understand what's happening with the pond and how that affects the pond, right? So as that planktonic algae, it starts shallow too. It starts in the shallow part and it works its way out deeper. So I'm not planktonic, filamentous. The planktonic algae is phytoplankton and zooplankton, and the filamentous algae, phytoplankton and zooplankton, are the base of the food chain. And the more you have of those, the more fish you'll have. Filamentous algae is the green, slimy stuff that you get in the spring. And it's important to understand that difference. So, when the filamentous algae gets too thick in the springtime, it allows those bass fry a place to hide and hunt and catch all of the fish that are just being born, but it protects them from larger bass that would normally be eating them. So typically on ponds where you see them, where they let the algae go in the spring, they tend to have too much bass reproduction survival because of that. And they tend to crowd towards having a lot of 1 pound bass. And it's a condition of letting the weeds get out of control and not understanding how that impacts your fishery. All right, we have a couple of questions coming through. Let's see. Would it be advantageous for the DNR to stock? I don't stock forage ever. Their pond should produce the forage naturally to get the fish to grow. If I'm relying on stocking fish to feed my fish, I am a fool. And I don't understand how fish actually grow and work, right? Because I see this all the time too, man. And the fish hatcheries take advantage of those dudes. They get a slightly bass heavy pond where their pond is all full of 1 pounders. The solution to that is reduce the 1 pounders, and the pond will naturally grow forage back, right? When you pull the predators down, it's like a seesaw. When you take one side down, the other side must go back up. So instead of taking the bass out because catch and release has been drilled into their head by the television for so long, that can't possibly be right. What they do is they get their money and they go to the fish hatchery and they start stocking, buying loads of shad, buying forage, buying shiners, buying. And this is sucker bet, man. This is like worse than taking your money to the casino for a retirement plan. This does not work. And I challenge anyone, take a bass heavy pond, measure the relative weights of the bass, right? The length and the width and the weight of the fish, and average out the relative weight the way I've showed you guys, and then stock as much as you want from the fish hatchery and measure it again. You will get no measurable increase in bass growth by stocking forage fish. I've never seen it, and I've seen dudes with plenty of money try it, and they never listen. And I wish I had that much money to spend, to waste, to light on fire, because that's what they're doing. And they don't listen. Dude that makes fast money never listens. He'll go on, he'll come on here, he'll read a few things. All of a sudden, he knows everything I've known. 30 years of experience are into his head because he read 2 of my posts. Somehow. I'm not sure how that works, but that's how it is in consulting. Like, they don't listen. I mean, I don't come on here and I'm not even worried about it. I can come on here and tell people exactly what I would do, exactly how I would do it. They will never do it. They don't listen. Roy got a good question coming in. How many bluegill can be stocked per acre in a new pond? So the textbook will tell you to stock 50 bass per acre and 500 bluegill per acre in an unfertilized, unfed pond. That is the textbook going rate of anything you get from any state agency, almost anywhere. It's going to give you that rate. In Georgia, I know because I've read these things. I don't know about anybody else's states, but in Georgia, they excuse me. They will also recommend you can go to 100 bass per acre and 1,000 bluegill per acre if you're fertilizing and or feeding the pond. You can double the rates, and that's what it says in the book. Now, if you followed me for very long, you know what I do is fertilize and do the fertilization feeding thing so I can stock I want to be driving the higher numbers of fish, but I stock the lower numbers of bass. Actually, I don't even stock 50 per acre. I stock 40 per acre because just after years of walking around watching people stock 50, it stunts out with in catch and release only terms. Most people are living in that world where they don't keep any bass. So if you stock 50 fish per acre, you're going to be stunted out in 3 to 4 years. The only way you can keep them from stunning is to stock less per acre. And that's where I deviate from the book. But I've done it a lot of times this way, and I grow bass really well, and I have really healthy fish ponds by reducing the numbers per acre because it fits more into the ideology of what the people are going to do. Because like I said, I can sit here all day and tell you, you really need to keep 1 pound bass. I've been saying it for years. I can guarantee you out of the 15,000 people who've been watching this page, not one of them's going to kept a 1 pound bass. Or very few of them, and they all literally, like everybody who listens to this page at 15, 16, whatever, 1,000 people, you could all go keep all the 1 pound bass you wanted in most places and only be helping. And that's what I'm trying to explain. It's gotten to the point where catch and release is really bad mismanagement in many, many places. And it's because we don't understand that bass can be overcrowded, that bass can have a spawn too big some springs, right? It can be, you can harvest them and over harvest them like they did back in the 70s, but you can also not harvest enough and have them crowd. And then everybody's standing around with snake thin, skinny bass talking about spawning stress and making dumb excuses for bass that are being managed badly and don't even know how to measure fish health and are all over this platform saying dumb things. So that's why I'm here. Thanks 7 of you for watching me. But I'm going to keep doing this every Sunday because I kind of have a problem with it. I do this for the health of the fish. If I can hopefully one day put a couple bucks in my pocket from doing this stuff, and by going live, I think on YouTube it might help me. So that's I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe it'll help the fish though. Maybe I'll never make any money, but all that'll happen is people kind of understand how to manage their fisheries better. That won't be bad either, will it? Kind of way I see that. Go back through the questions. Yeah, man. Midwest is walking in talking about biomass and how to well, Kevin, there's a perfect example of what I'm talking about right there, buddy. I've tried to talk with Randy, and I think here's what I think. I'm just going to tell you guys the truth, man. I have all the aces up my sleeve. Okay? I don't have to argue with anyone. I don't have to fight with anyone. I don't have to lose my patience because those guys like him might as well be trying to convince us that the world is flat. All right? Because this is the truth. And there was a time way back when everybody in the world thought this place was flat, And I don't care how many people back then thought the world was flat, the world is still round. All right? People's idea of reality doesn't change reality. I don't know if people's idea of reality doesn't change reality. And no matter how many of those pro fisherman guys think that catch and release is the end all be all solution to managing lakes, it's not. And no matter how many of them say it is, it's not going to change. So I don't have to argue or fight. I have measured scientific fact. We might as well be trying to prove gravity. Like you're taking a foolish stance to argue against what I'm saying because this is not my opinion, right? You're arguing against the world is round and flat, right? I've measured science, proven facts. It's not an opinion. So I don't have to be mad or upset. I just have to be patient because the truth always wins, and I'm only telling them the truth. And I've seen guys like him though, guys like him flunk out of college. Guys like him need to go get a job where college doesn't matter because they can't learn. Like, and it's not they're too stupid. I'm not saying he's a stupid person, but their ego gets in the way of their learning. They think they already know, therefore they can't learn. And it's really widespread. And it's got nothing to do with politics. It's got nothing to do with, it's everybody's that way. I'm that way. You're that way. Like, we all kind of act that way. But some guys, like, can't put their ego aside and learn. I mean, it happened to me at Georgia, man. Like, I got there kind of thinking, man, I've been bass fishing my whole life and I've been around water my whole life. And I thought it gave me an advantage. And it did not. It did not. Um, because you're learning about fish at a level that, like, a doctor learns about people, you know? The guys that I went to school with were really smart, man. Smarter than me. And that's what's going on, you're just dealing with people like that when, especially now, man, when I have literally, like, done it live on the internet, you know, it's one thing to say, what I'm saying isn't true. I mean, I had all this stuff happening to me a couple years ago. I was telling people that I've grown bass 2 to 3 pounds in a year before, and usually on Facebook, some on YouTube. I don't catch as much static on Instagram, but I don't know why. But yeah, they said, I mean, just basically, you're a liar. You're just not. That's not possible. And then I did it, and now I don't hear from those dudes anymore. So the same thing will happen with this catch and release stuff because they're just wrong. And like I said, I got all the aces up my sleeve. I got the truth on my side. I got experience. Midwest writes in, anglers must understand the difference between anecdotal observations and peer-reviewed empirical data. Yeah, see, so that right there is a perfect example of kind of the opposite. Like, sometimes, like, people, I understand exactly what you said. But if you haven't gone to college, peer-reviewed empirical data doesn't mean anything to you, right? And it also sounds pretentious sometimes when the verbiage gets too much. So that was a big thing for me on this page, is to get rid of the dialogue like that. Get rid of the any kind of scientific jargon or any kind of words really that kids couldn't understand, or somebody who hadn't maybe been to school, hadn't had an opportunity to have a vocabulary, because people get lost in that. And I noticed it when I was doing consulting. When people use too much terminology, like when the other biologists would use too much terminology around people who weren't familiar with it, they would just get lost in it. They would just glaze over, and they were just like, and it's like, you're not communicating effectively. So that's where I'm coming from. But I've been doing this a long time. I've been trying to explain these concepts to people and help people with their ponds for a long time. And I'm just doing what's been most effective, I guess. Got some more things coming through. Let's see what we got. One of the best ones for Randy is important to brood stock needs offshore roaming. Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm not listening to guys. I mean, if they want to, if you want to get somebody, who knows what they're talking about, I'll listen to it. And that's what I advise you guys do with any of these folks. Like, I'll be glad to stay in my lane. I am not going to stand here and tell you how to win a bass tournament. I've never really won one. I've fished a little bass club for a few years and won one of those once, I think. But, I'm not a tournament fisherman. And I fish big lakes, and they're different than fishing in ponds. I think you can definitely learn some things from ponds and that apply to lakes. But I think if you want to be a big lake fisherman and be good at it, you need to go fish big lakes. And fishing in ponds pretty much isn't going to help you very much. It's not the same thing. Big public lakes are just different for many ways. And, that's also why we don't talk about big public lake management, because I don't do that. But I do talk about pond management because if you think you can take big lake management and what you hear about how they manage these reservoirs and apply it to a pond, you're sadly mistaken. You have failed in understanding there's a difference. And that's what this page is for, because I've seen that for years and years where, hearsay and groupthink and, a little bit of talking to the biologist at the boat ramp, and now you're doing what they're doing at the lake back at your pond, but you're messing up, and the fish are suffering because of it. And that's what I see, man. Fish suffering. People might hold up a fish that looks a little too skinny to them. You're holding up starvation to me. We're not seeing things through the same eyes. I don't get up and do this every day for free because it's not really, really important to me. And, I think the best expression I've ever heard is the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And that's exactly what catch and release has done. It's a lot of good intentions, but it is not right. Let's see, they're fading in and out here. Yep, sounds like people are harder to manage than fish, says Kevin Atwell. Thanks, Rich, man. I appreciate you. Thank you, Kevin. You are correct. That is where we are on that, though, gentlemen, from my perspective. And my perspective is not a popular perspective. My perspective will not change one iota because I measured it. It's not an opinion. I measured it with math and science. That's it. So either the truth will matter or it won't on a grander scale, if that makes sense. I have confidence that it will. Maybe, let's see here. NDES 13 comes in. I've said excessive depth in a pod could be a disadvantage. Is a disadvantage. I said could be. So is and could be are two different things, bro. But does this hold true for northern ponds? So I'm going to come back to you too, Midwest. I see you there. To address this one, though, let's go with that. So, yeah, man, it could be a disadvantage. Not is a disadvantage. A lot of factors apply to how depth kind of works out for you. So this last week we had in Georgia would be a perfect example of how depth could work as a disadvantage to you, where we had excessively hot temperatures followed by a hurricane with extremely cool rain. So we went from like the hottest temperatures of the year to the coolest temperatures of the fall in a weekend. If the volume of water, because what happens when that, all right, so let me get my hand here. All right, so what will happen in a really deep pond is, let's see, let's say this is the bottom of the pond and this is the surface of the pond. The surface water will have the oxygen, and the lower oxygen will, in a pond when it stratifies, the lower part of the pond will not have oxygen. And where it gets dangerous is when it gets really hot. It kind of shrinks that level up here of oxygenated water and increases the deoxygenated water in the superheat on deep ponds. So then if this water gets cooled, because the only thing that keeps these two apart are temperature. So when the hurricane comes in and dumps that cold water on this really thin oxygenated level and cools it enough to flip and go into here, you have a higher volume of water without oxygen than with oxygen. So that, in that specific scenario, that is called a turnover, and that is where your depth of your pond can kill your fish. It can work that way, but again, there's a lot of really specific scenarios that have to line up for that to be a disadvantage for the pond. I hope that makes sense. I've seen now ponds will naturally turn over in the spring and the fall. In northern ponds twice a year, and in southern ponds once in the fall. But um, that process is usually later in cooler temperatures, and so then when it's cooler, this oxygenated level is very big, and because the waters are cooler and the oxygen kind of gets deeper, just naturally how the how lakes work. So when it turns over in the fall, since the water is already cooler and holding more oxygen than in the summertime, that turnover doesn't deplete the oxygen levels to the point where it kills the fish. Whereas if you get a turnover in the summertime, it's a big difference. So that's kind of where people get confused about turnovers, because turnovers are naturally occurring, but it's when they occur, you know. And if they were to occur last week, that'd be bad, you know. If they occur in mid-October when it's cooler temperatures, it's no problem. It's just natural. All right, Midwest had something else going. Oh, you're welcome. Midwest just sending in thank you notes, man. I appreciate you, man. Should we release the bigger bass? Kevin writes in, say 20 plus. Yeah, man, that's a good question. So when you get into managing the pond correctly, and like I said, I'm just going on experience on what I've done. Pretty much what you're going to have is a situation where you're going to be removing the bass that are under 16 inches and putting back the bass that are over 16 inches. 16-inch bass do a really good job at eating other bass. That's kind of when their mouth gets big enough that they can really do some damage on some smaller bass. And that's kind of your breaking point, 15, 16 inches. When you get a decent population of 16-inch bass, you won't have an overcrowded small bass population, right? It one thing like a seesaw. One thing prevents the other. When 16s go up, the fish around a pound go down because they're forage. Um, where most ponds are right now is people don't understand that, and their bass are all crowded around 12, 13, 14, right in there. And since all their bass are piled up into like the 12 to 14-inch range, they're what's called stunted. They've stopped growing. There's enough forage coming off to keep them alive, but there's not enough forage coming off to get them growing. And where you'll see that is in their relative weight. A stunted bass is relative weight. He'll be 12 inches long, but it'll be like 0.85 pounds, not like 1.1 pounds, right? And all of them will be that way. Like you catch another one, another one, another one, and they're all just under that standard weight chart that we measure our fish against. So, like I said, man, we're not inventing this stuff, right? We can literally measure it. We can measure the fish that are growing properly. We can measure the fish that are not. Thanks, Midwest. I appreciate you, man. I've been on here a long time. I appreciate you hanging out with me, brother. Thank you, man. Thanks, NDES. Appreciate it. All right. Well, we've been on an hour. We've answered a few questions. And I guess let me make sure I didn't miss anyone. Frozen ponds and DM messages. All right, boys, I'm going to exit out with Midwest, man. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. 8 people for today. That's more than I expected to have. We'll be back next Sunday about this time. Let's try about 11 o'clock. And I appreciate it. Thanks, Rich, man. I appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next Sunday with it.